Lisa, I am so excited to meet you and talk to you. I think this podcast could be 5 hours long, probably.
We'll do a series. What the hell?
Yeah,
Why not?
exactly. But gosh, I've been reading about you and talking about you and listening to other people talk about you. I guess I'll start with the most typical question is that you're never supposed to ask, but how are you doing?
Well, I'm a little jet lagged. I've just come back from a great month in Africa working for Journalists for Human Rights on women's issues, actually, for journalists and female politicians. And teenage girls who are victims of rape and end up pregnant and become outcasts. And it's been an incredibly full, inspiring, emotional, and fulfilling month to be able to cover these stories for Journalists for Human Rights. And so, how am I? I'm good.
Obviously, your story, Lisa, created a firestorm and you became the story, which no journalist really likes. Um, how how uncomfortable were you that the whole world, or at least a lot of us, were talking about you?
Uh, well, it I don't know how to answer that because it's it's still something that I'm understanding. Let's put it that way. And the support obviously has been enormous globally. I realize that journalists, we are a support system, which I might not have known about, and women support women, which is huge. And so I would say that for me, that has been a great comfort, really, at a time of change. And I think we all need that, no matter what our change is. Um, it is something that keeps us feeling strong.
August 15th of last year, you recorded something for your audience, for your viewers, explaining what had happened.
Hello, everyone. Today, with a range of emotions, I'm sharing with you some information about me and my career with CTV News. For 35 years, I have had the privilege of being welcomed into your homes to deliver the news on a nightly basis, so I felt you should hear this directly from me. On June 29th, I was informed that Bell Media made a, quote, business decision to end my contract, bringing to a sudden close my long career with CTV News. I was blindsided and am still shocked and saddened by Bell Media's decision. I was also asked to keep this confidential from my colleagues and the public until the specifics of my exit could be resolved. That has now happened, and I want you to know what these last 35 years have meant to me. Everything. Reporting on the darkest days of war from Iraq, Afghanistan, and this year Ukraine, to covering natural disasters, this pandemic, federal elections, amazing Olympic moments, and so many other consequential events, including this summer's papal apology to residential school survivors. I need you to know that this is a trust I have never taken for granted as a reporter and as an anchor. I am forever grateful to you, such loyal viewers, for sharing in the belief that news delivered with integrity and truth strengthens our democracy.
Lisa, when you listen to yourself say those words, I can only imagine what you're feeling, even now, almost 8 months after you got word that you would no longer have the job that you loved.
Yeah, I guess like for you and I both, covering sudden change is what we've always done. Let's face it. You never know when you wake up what the day is going to, how you're going to go to bed that night, what's going to have happened in the world. So I was very adept at covering sudden change. And I put everything in perspective. So this happened, and then my own sudden change gets, as you said earlier, no journalist wants to be part of the story or the story, but it's all perspective for me. You know, I've seen Canadian and US soldiers and British soldiers have their legs blown off in Afghanistan. I've seen babies born in tarpaulins in Haiti. Really, that's the sudden change you don't come back from. And I put everything in perspective. I always have, and including this. So I don't linger. I look forward, and I have to, because I am an optimist, and it's gotten me to 58 and a half. So, you know, that's how I view it, to be honest, looking forward.
And it sounds like you're doing some incredible things, but now that 8 months have passed since you learned your contract was not going to be honored, you had 2 years left on your contract, Lisa. Do you have any better understanding about how it happened, why it happened, and why it was handled the way it was handled?
What do? We're in this industry that we both love, and we know business decisions happen every single day. People lose their jobs every single day, and many of my dear friends in this industry have lost their jobs. So that's the nature of the industry, is change, and it is a very changing industry right now, as we both know. So I look forward. I have to, as I said, optimism is my default position. Although I would say cynicism and optimism sort of are dance partners in my brain. I'm going to give optimism the lead, as I always do, because that's, you know, the alternative isn't as pleasant.
Let's talk about the backlash, though. Why do you think this whole chapter in your life and this incident struck such a chord among so many women? Certainly women my age, and certainly, women who have been in careers for a long time. It smacked of just terrible ageism and sexism, and, a double standard that so many women have had to deal with. Certainly, I feel like I've had to deal with that my whole career. Tell me, when you saw everyone reacting the way they were, how did you make sense of it?
Let's speak then in generalities, because we've both, been in this industry a long time, and we know lots of women who have also been in it. And I would say I don't know what resonated. All I know is that what I was told, and I will say again, in generalities, women are standing up for each other, as we always have. I mean, I'm sure in my mother's generation they did. Things change, though. You don't know about what it's like when you're 58, when you're 28. You sort of, maybe that's just life. We learn as we age how things change, and we're all going through this process. We call it ageism, which is uniquely attached to women in general terms. We don't talk about ageism when it comes to men, and I think that's an important distinction to make. As a society, we should address this clearly.
I think ageism does affect men. I think probably in broadcast journalism, it's quite different, because while men are allowed to age and look distinguished and
We
avuncular,
lionize silver-haired
right,
men, don't we?
right, but when women start to show their age, it's jarring and off-putting and considered, not appealing to an audience, which is so infuriating, honestly. And I think part of it is because we don't have real role models of women being allowed to age naturally on television or even in other forms of media. And I think that's one of the real issues, and people like Anderson Cooper can have white hair the same color as your hair, or lack thereof, and be called a silver fox. But when it happens to a woman, it's a whole different ballgame.
Although I'm going to tell you, when this process started for me, which by the way is decades ago that I started going gray, and I've been coloring my hair forever, it feels like.
In fact, you started going gray in your 20s, right?
Yeah, I did. I did. And I had very dark hair. And I think that's just a natural genetic thing.
Right.
And you get used to it. You get used to coloring your hair. And I remember being tired of it, well, many, many times over the years, especially when I was in specific like war zones and you realize, oh God, I've got 3 weeks. That's the window. We have 3 weeks before the roots start being obvious when you have really dark hair. So when it happened for me, I reached my max was when obviously the pandemic, all of the salons were closed in Toronto, and I mentally said, what am I doing here? I don't have time, is the bottom line. You're too busy. You're covering like the weirdest, craziest story you've ever covered. And and I am not kidding. When you're in a newsroom and all of a sudden on a Friday, more than half the room leaves and you've got 4 people left, and it's the city's shutting down, the world is shutting down. You're looking what's happening in Wuhan and in Parma in Italy, and you're thinking, what is going on here? The last thing you're thinking about is your hair. So one Saturday morning in the very early days of the pandemic, obviously 3 weeks in, because that's when it was an issue. And I listened to a podcast of women talking about the history of hair dyeing. And it was fascinating. I never thought about it, never knew anything about it. And it was basically after the Second World War, women were getting back into the workforce. Men didn't want to see their mothers sitting in the typing pool or at the reception desk. So, bravo to the marketing teams. They came up with a product that would make you look younger. And
only your hairdresser knows for sure.
Exactly. And we know that to this day, that line. So that's the power of marketing. So anyway, that podcast gave me the confidence I needed, plus one of my beautiful sisters who had done it already. And I thought, you know what, this is crazy. I can't do it. The drugstore ran out of hair touch-up dye and all that. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And that was it. And I remember very vividly being, a few months in, and it is ugly. I mean, we all know it is not pretty to see the old
have a racing stripe or look like a skunk. Yeah.
And I was in my dog park here, and a woman on a Saturday morning, it was almost like a Mary Tyler Moore moment. She took her beret off. She said, "I'm with you, Lisa." And she had the whole skunk going on. And I don't know, I just thought it was good. Although I wished I could have worn a beret for the news.
Well, let me ask you, as a practical matter, how did you deal with that transition from dyeing your hair every 3 weeks to letting it become, by the way, the beautiful head of white hair you have now?
You're very kind. I just honestly, I did not look at myself. And, as a TV person, you sit in a makeup chair and you get your I couldn't even, I couldn't even look. I couldn't look. And I just did it. And my dear friend and hair guru, Rana, for years, she would say to me, you go, just keep going, don't worry. And everybody was going through it. Don't forget that. Like this was I don't know what your timing of your lockdown was where you are, but here it was long term.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
long term here as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really amazing. And I think it's also a skill we have as journalists where you block out that which we do not understand, we block. And all of a sudden, it was done. It was ugly. There was a massive amount of email and tweets rather, but it was largely positive because people were going through the same thing. And I cut my own hair, like with, I did go to the pharmacy and get scissors, and I just kept kind of getting it less and less. And whatever, it happens. It happened over time, and I don't know. It's very liberating, which sounds weird for the time when we were in lockdown. I understand the irony of that, but now, I mean, honestly, it's having been, just like I said, in Africa for the last month, never even an issue. Never even an issue. That is a first.
Well, let's talk about the reaction. And I'm curious. So the reaction was mostly supportive, right?
Mhm.
Did you get any negative feedback either from within your company or outside the company? I'm curious what people were saying and writing about.
Well, I mean, obviously, there were. I don't know if you're the same as me, but you seem to remember the negative comments, sadly, more.
I think that's pretty much human nature. I think
Yeah,
everyone's like that.
yeah. So, yeah, I would say by and large, incredibly positive feedback. As I said, it was this weird moment in time when everybody was going through this. So that did give me liberties and confidence to continue on this path. Had there been no pandemic, I have no idea. But that was what happened then. So, yes, there were some negative comments, but actually laughable, to be honest with you. I learned a long time ago to laugh at the people who had all this wide open criticism of any woman on TV, on Twitter. Okay, buddy, thanks. Thanks for your view. I'll park that. But, you know, I would say the mass majority, inside and outside, was positive. And I remember thinking at one point, I guess, like, this, you've gone too far now. You get to this point and you're like, okay, you're 3 inches on either side of the part. You're not going back.
And so how did the people at the station or at your network, how did people at CTV respond to it? Did you get any inkling that this was a problem?
Not at all. Totally positive. Totally positive. Never totally positive is what I would say. My female colleague, my male colleagues, by the way, I have had a very dear, the show producer who I used to call Anderson Cooper because he went prematurely gray. And he's like, you're in the club, so very positive. It was never anything that except for my own looking in the mirror problem, which we all deal with, sadly, not just women in this business, but women in general, probably. So that's a transition. That is something you are getting used to. What do you look like? You've been a dark brunette forever. So that's kind of a shift that takes time. But, through all of that and before, there were all kinds of other things going on. The news, it's been an incredibly fast-paced news cycle for so long that I'm not exaggerating when I say I didn't have a lot of time to really think about the negativity, of which it was small.
Right.
Didn't worry, didn't stop me.
You
So
were the lead anchor for 11 years. You had developed an incredibly, important parasocial relationship with your
good
viewers.
word. Love it. Yeah.
People trusted you. They liked you, which is important. You do feel like you get to know someone, even uh, you know, you feel like you get to know someone on television. I certainly have had that experience as well. I'm sure a million people have come up to you and said, I feel like I know you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's been, it's got to be the same, you know, on mass writ large for you, but it's always been something that gives you, it's lovely. I mean, Canadians are not that overt, to be
Yeah,
honest.
but they're
So
so nice. They're so polite, aren't they? They seem like they
well,
are.
they're very polite. There's some on my Twitter feed, maybe not so much, but
Yeah.
that's also human nature. But so yeah, there's an intimacy there, whether it is, and I also was did a morning show for a couple of years in Canada just before the war in Iraq, and I realized then, just be who you are. And that was all. That's actually the advice I give young journalists now, women and men, is, you know, do your homework, know your stuff, and be yourself, because the viewer sniffs out a fake in a heartbeat. I always found, and it is funny though. I mean, if I had a dime for every teenage girl or young woman who said, "My mother loves you," you, you must have had that too. And I love it because they say they watch together. So if that's a tradition, then bring it on. It was really lovely. And it is, as I said before, the support of women that gets us through a lot of the dark times, no matter what it is, in my opinion.
How can we support women as they age in a whole host of fields, whether it's on the big screen in movies, whether it's TV news anchors? How can we appreciate the wisdom and the experience that comes from being in the business for a long time, even if you don't look like a prototypical, young news ingenue? Do you think it's changing?
Well, I think that what we can do is continue doing what we're doing, which is, you know, talking out loud, calling it out when we see something, encouraging young women. I think right now, for women of color, it is a devastation what they're facing online. I honestly, I am I'm angry. I'm absolutely angry what young women of color are now dealing with. And I think for us, we may have gone through this in our 20s and 30s, although there was no social media. Now it's a different ballgame. So what can we do? You know, we've got voices and platforms and ways of expressing how we feel when we see this kind of misogyny and sexism. We just have to keep um, naming and shaming, I guess, to try to expose a patriarchal society that, I mean, I'm not kidding you. I was in Tunisia where we were working on stories about, believe it or not, normalizing the idea of women on TV, normalizing the idea of women politicians. So we in North America, we actually have, made enormous strides, obviously, but it's clearly there's hurdles, and age is one, women of color is one, bigger, I would say. And I guess it's just it's the support network that we just can't let our side down.
At the same time, while Wendy's showed Wendy with the gray hair, there was so much support for you from women everywhere, and many men as well, who thought you were treated very shoddily. Um, w- what did that achieve exactly? I mean, the story happened, people got mad and protested. It sort of makes me mad that like they didn't reverse their decision, or we're we're not seeing you on another network delivering the evening news. I mean, what more can be done to make sure the message is being heard loud and clear, and that people are voting with their remote controls or their or their, spending?
I would say, in general terms, I'm not going to speak about my own situation. I will say, in general terms, in society, we don't realize or recognize or utilize the voice we have as consumers in this world, especially where we are. That is, things change when you stick to an argument. I mean, I'm not gonna talk about that because I can't. But I will say these things over time make a difference.
Well,
It's
people I don't think realize how much power they have,
they don't. They don't.
when certain people boycott certain networks, they pay attention. And if they galvanize consumers to boycott a network, that can have a real impact. I wish that more had been done when this happened to you, to be honest.
For me, it's now about the future, and I am embracing it. And the opportunities are exciting. And I've been so working at triple speed for so many years, deadline oriented. And now I get to explore issues that mean so much to me. And I am no pun intended, but I'm always looking for silver linings. I always was, and I still am. So I think that is an important thing for people to address. But on this, in general, the subject of ageism is something we shouldn't let our guard down. I mean, I look so much to, indigenous cultures where it's the elders, the knowledge keepers we look to as our guides. And in other cultures, it's, women of a certain age become, was it Germaine Greer who called us crones at a certain age? That's something we can keep working to change. And it, as I said before, you just keep calling something out. This is not about my situation. As I said, this is about women in general, and it's not something that just mattered to me recently. This is an issue of sexism and ageism. Anything ending in an ism, to be honest, has been something that has been worth focusing on, analyzing, and determining the veracity of it, if I can
Yeah,
put it that way.
I agree, except for feminism. That's a good ism.
That's a great ism. Speaking of Germaine.
Let's talk about sexism, though. I think you and I got into the news business around the same time. I'm a little older than you are, but do you feel that it's changed dramatically? Because I joke in speeches that I got into TV news when harass was 2 words instead of 1. And when people said that I lacked gravitas when I did the CBS Evening News, I said I later discovered that is actually Latin for testicles. So I guess I'm wondering, do you think that it's changed? I mean, there's certainly many, many more high profile women in television news, both on camera and behind the scenes in executive positions than there were when I started out, by far. So do you think strides have been made? And what kind of bullshit did you have to deal with, Lisa, early on in your career? I'm just curious.
Mm, probably the same bullshit you had to deal with, because and we have, first of all, top answer, absolutely, we've made strides. I mean, I remember begging to go to Baghdad 23 years ago, whatever it was. Now women are assigned. Women and men are in a assignment desk doesn't decide based on gender. So that's huge. I remember being in a newsroom when I was 24 and not even being, which I don't know what to make of this, but obviously in an edit suite, there would be, I don't know if you ever had I'm sure you do, a newspaper that used to have page 3, which was the scantily clad woman.
Yeah, I think that's thanks to Rupert Murdoch. I think that was more in the UK than
Well,
here
it's
in the
totally
States.
Yeah, well, we're part of the Commonwealth, so we inherited that one too.
Lucky you.
That page would be in the editing suites, and I remember, here's the weird part, not being shocked. I'm sure I was embarrassed as a young reporter. Obviously, I was. You grow a thick skin early on as a woman in this industry, and you wear it. You have to learn to wear that thick skin, and it will be used against you. And fine, bring it on. Honestly, you want to. Our first obligation is always to the truth, and never to those people trying to tear us down. And that has just been, before social media, that was handwritten letters, of which I have kept. And I haven't looked at them in a long time, obviously, but it's been a journey of beautiful progress for women. Of course it has, absolutely, in this industry. And I had this great luxury of having a female senior producer, a female executive producer, really great women but growing up, and certainly as a young reporter, no. There was Barbara Walters, really, was the one. Diane Sawyer on 60 Minutes, I remember vividly watching, thinking, okay, but I'm serious. There were very few. Kate Adie on the BBC. So yeah, young women today, and certainly young journalists, have a lot of people they can look to say, okay, this is all possible. Don't forget also, I was raised in a family of all girls where we were sort of raised as boys, which I think helped. I never ever thought gender was an issue for me. And if it reared its ugly head, I knew a quick way of shutting it down. And I think that comes back to the thick skin. We all grow at some point, and it's a new layer depending on the era.
I feel like progress has been made, and then I hear someone like Don Lemon making a bonehead remark on CNN about women in their prime. I know Don Lemon, and he's
Is
a
he
nice
185 years old?
No, he's actually a nice guy. I think maybe he was trying to be provocative, or maybe he was, reacting to ageism by Nikki Haley with sexism. Again, those isms, probably not a good idea at all. But what was your reaction when you heard what he had said?
Well, again, it's all through the prism of the moment. And I was in Africa when that happened, and I had just been talking to a female politician, the first Arab woman ever to become the mayor of a major Arab city. And I go back, I do the interview, I go back, and I'm checking where the Wi-Fi is. I'm checking, oh, why is Don Lemon trending? I'm not joking. I was gobsmacked at the idiocy of that comment. I replayed it. Did I just hear that? There was a, I don't know, sanctimonious quality to the Google it part that I just was stunned at. And I'm exhausted by the sort of the head against the brick wall nature of a comment like that. Obviously, he wouldn't have said it if he didn't feel there was some kind of acceptability in society to make a comment like that. And that is a sad statement. I don't know the man. I do not know him, but I know that that comment gave me enormous insight into how his mind works. And I wish his mind would catch up with the calendar, because it's 2023. You've been living in the same world we've all been living in. You covered every movement. I'm speaking to him. We didn't all go through the movements, and I'm the most recent, obviously, the Me Too movement, and not recognize the inappropriateness of shelving women. How do we take him seriously when he interviews the next female politician, or any woman's issue, really, if you think the woman you're interviewing is over 30 or maybe 40 and is a has-been? I don't know.
I think he was trying to be cute and made a terrible mistake. And I'm not sure he really believes that. I think he was trying to be provocative and, edgy or something.
Is
And
that okay, though, when you have a position, as we both know, is a position of privilege?
oh, I
to
don't think it's okay at all. I'm just trying to understand his motivation and what might have prompted him to make such a bonehead comment.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. And it's, the thing is, I mean, look at women over 50 have other things to deal with. Menopause is a big one. We don't talk about that. It's not a thing that puts us back. It's a thing that we then, I don't know about you, if you had to go through the same way, but there are so many things that women have to deal with. And the concept of hitting 30 and being considered out of past your prime is just so surreal to me that I don't know if he was being cute or provocative. It didn't work. I
No,
would say.
no. It's interesting because when I wrote my book, I was looking back on the Jane Pauley, Deborah Norville fiasco. And Jane was moved out when she was, I believe, 38 years old. Some of
Wow.
the male executives thought that she wasn't appealing to a younger demographic. Adriana, it was 38, right? That Jane was, that they started making noises about whether she was long in the tooth. And it's just so insane. I do think things have changed. Now you have Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes. I think Leslie is 81 years old and she's still doing stories for 60 Minutes. Jane is back doing anchoring Sunday morning. And so I think the more women of all ages, but women, I don't even want to say of a certain age, but women who are older, let's just call a spade, the more we see older women, the more they're going to be accepted as just part of the mosaic of people who are in mass media. Well, mass media doesn't really exist anymore, but media writ large.
Veterans, let's call them what we call men, veteran journalists. We've earned the years. But you just brought your book up, and I have to say, first of all, you talk about one person making a change. The whole campaign for getting people to get a colonoscopy, and I dutifully followed your advice. But I wondered, I wondered if I've always wanted to interview you, if I can turn the tables on you and ask you one question.
Of course.
If you knew then what you know now, the fallout of the book, the reaction to the book, would you write the same book?
I would. I
love hearing that.
I
I
would.
found it so personal.
I tried to be radically honest about my life and about my shortcomings and my, some things that I wish I had done better, some things I'm proud of, because it was a real examination of my experiences and my perception of other people, but also a chance to really evaluate myself and to be self-reflective. And I've gotten so much positive feedback from the book. It was interesting when I was hearing uh Prince Harry talk about the reception to his book. What, happens now in media today is things get cherry picked and twisted. And I think when people read my book in its totality, they really appreciate everything I talked about and said. But when someone with an agenda is trying to, portray it a certain way or get clicks or, make tabloid headlines, I think sometimes things are really misreported and misinterpreted. And there's a lot of dishonesty there, which is something I probably wasn't really prepared for, honestly. But, you know, I'm so proud of my book and I love my book. Isn't that weird? Like, I
I
love
love you.
my book.
You want
And
to know something? Your book is you, it's your heart. And it was so evident on every page, the honesty. And I think that was empowering for me to read it, for anybody in this industry. And not just women, men as well, because they go through this as well on a different level. Of course they do. And I think it's that kind of honesty that does make change. And
and I think, it took a lot of guts to be honest and to point out mistakes I had made or things I had done that I wasn't proud of. And I think that if people were really honest with themselves, there would be a lot of things maybe about themselves that they would also kind of recognize. But I think there are few people who have the self-confidence and the sense of self that allows them to be as honest as I was. And so I'm really proud of myself for that.
That's beautiful to hear. And you're absolutely right. And maybe that does come with time, the confidence to be able to say out loud and write down, these were the experiences, here's what I learned from them. And people learn from that, which
Yeah,
is
here's what
the
I
gift.
might have done differently or wish I had done differently. And if, I think someone with a perfect life who made all the best decisions and acted, in an exemplary fashion their entire life, every minute of the day, I think that would be a pretty boring piece of fiction.
Mhm.
I'm curious. We can't really have a conversation without talking about how much journalism has changed since you and I entered the field. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on sort of the modern media landscape. Linear television is declining every day. I know that some people have posited that, your salary might, you're being paid a lot of money, as was I when I had those jobs. And as the demand declines, salaries are going down as well. And I'm just curious how you feel about misinformation, disinformation, a fragmented media landscape, truth decay, as it's sometimes been called, living in a post-factual world. Uh, it's just so dramatically different than it was when we started out. And
Yeah.
I can't think I mean, there are positive things. More voices can be heard. It's not as narrow. The gatekeepers can't keep people out. On the other hand, just blowing it open and anyone with a phone can write things, or anybody in their basement in their pajamas, and people can create their own ecosystems and their own news environments and bubbles. I don't know. What
Mm.
are your thoughts on all of this change?
Well, I mean, I always think we've never been more informed and less enlightened. It's a difficult time because of misinformation, and I don't understand why people cede their their um, their power of critical thinking and allow the bandwagon to just keep piling on more people when it comes to certainly criticizing a term I can't stand, which is mainstream media. I mean, this is just traditional media where people are getting paid to work hard, to learn a craft. It's like, would you go to Twitter if you had colon cancer and get advice? What, if you had a lump in your breast, would you go to Instagram? No, you'd go to a doctor. So if you want a fact on what's going on in Ukraine or Afghanistan at this moment, why wouldn't you go to people who are professional journalists who've learned that this is a craft that we've honed, and that's our only job is to gather facts. And so I am sad for I'm worried because I feel like we need some kind of correction in the world right now to expose the misinformation. It's not that difficult to check your sources. And I feel like you give a kid a phone at an early age, and it's like a hand grenade if they don't know yet the difference between fake news and real news. And that worries me. I always believe media literacy is as important as math, maybe more important than math right now. Since we have a phone, we can quickly calculate. We don't really use our brain the way we had to. And that worries me that we don't, like, I mean, Finland, for example, it is now in kindergarten, part of the curriculum in kindergarten, to teach the difference between real news, fake news, misinformation, disinformation. This should be everywhere because it is one of the most important elements in every single person's life now, is the influences that we see on every level, whether it's on our phone or anywhere. But I forget who once said, whoever's criticizing mainstream media, it's not the traditional media they're dismissing, it's the elbow grease. It's the elbow grease they're dismissing, because the journalists are the ones who know how to put the car back together when it's all and I think during the pandemic, one of the biggest legacies was misinformation. And there were nights I used to feel like we're spending half the time correcting false information. And sometimes that came from the highest levels of power. And that is very disconcerting. So there's a lot of work to do here, and we can't, any of us, stop.
Do you think the genie's out of the bottle, that media literacy is our best hope? Because it seems to me that correcting disinformation, that it is just, it's too pervasive. It's become too ubiquitous to kind of corral it at this point. I don't know.
Can't give in, can't. I mean, honestly, we can't accept that. We have to keep fighting to expose misinformation. And I don't know, we are seeing it. We're seeing it crumble in certain places, and then it pops like whack-a-mole,
Yes.
And that is frustrating. But I don't feel it's something we can ever, I mean, we're seeing trust being eroded in all of the institutions of society.
Right. Yes, I
And
agree.
media
And
is one of them.
yeah, and I'm curious how you feel about this move towards more commentary on cable news. You know, for so long, I've just been trained, or I was trained as a journalist, and now I'm more outspoken because I have my own company and I can speak out about things that I am passionate about gun violence or helping people understand sort of our changing notions of gender identity and, but I never gave my opinion on anything. And now it is tonally so different, particularly in cable news and prime time. And I'm wondering how you feel about that.
I feel it's one of the reasons for the erosion, actually. Um, if people want to know what's happening in the world, you need on the ground field reporters who can cover it through their eyes, trusted eyes, show us what's happening. Don't give me your opinion. I do love, I've got to be honest, I'm a complete newspaper junkie for columns, well thought out. I just love it.
Right.
I love reading that. But I don't need, I don't know. I feel that is part of the problem. And I don't know if it's a money thing. I have no idea why it seems like that's taken over.
I think it's because a shrinking audience, you have to get a certain piece of the pie. So instead of giving information, which I think people don't necessarily have a visceral response to, right? And it takes intellectual work to be a critical thinker,
Mhm.
that to get sort of a like-minded audience who wants to hear kind of a reinforcement or validation of their own pre-existing views, that they gravitate towards people who reflect those views.
But in the end, what have you learned? Actually, like if you look at the situation on the ground in Ukraine right now, I mean, you can hear all of the chat, we'll call it chat. It is only though the very rare, which is still there, it's still there, the generals who've experienced war in any Afghanistan or Iraq, who can look at the actual battlefront and give you some knowledge that might give you an insight into where it's going next. But the general, I don't know with general chat if we're actually informing the public. And I agree with you. I am trained also to just give the facts. And that's a comfortable place to be because I know what to do with facts. I'm seeing something, I'm asking questions, I'm getting answers, and that is the fact for that moment in that place. And we reflect it back. Otherwise, I don't know, I'm not equipped. I couldn't possibly give people an opinion that would be worth it for a conflict of that nature or any of these things. I don't understand actually why it's shifted so dramatically onto the chat format and away from news. That's why I ask, could it be money, in the sense that fewer resources in the industry at large mean fewer field reporters, fewer
Definitely. I think that's definitely part of it. I mean, producing an in-studio show with people giving their opinions is a lot less expensive than having foreign bureaus and having reporters on the ground. And, I think there's still obviously places that do that and do it well. And I also think having Donald Trump as president presented certain challenges to news organizations in terms of how they handled misinformation that he was perpetuating, that the president of the United States was perpetuating. And if they corrected him, they would be considered biased or criticized him, or it made it even more complex and even murkier. And I'm curious, sort of along those lines, to get your opinion on Fox News, because in the Dominion lawsuit, it's surfaced, and I'm sure you've been reading about this, Lisa, that their primetime anchors knew that there were falsehoods being perpetrated by people about a stolen election, but they also knew their audience, and they were afraid they were gravitating to more conservative upstart networks like Newsmax. And so they intentionally lied to their audience,
Mhm.
and they intentionally they intentionally lied to their audiences. They intentionally lied to their audience and they told them what they wanted to hear. And to me, that is such a betrayal of and so craven. And as Rupert Murdoch himself said, it was a business decision. I mean, now the question is, do Fox News viewers even care that they
We
were
also,
lied to?
that's a question, and also accountability. Democracy is something we should protect and not allow. I don't know what the viewership is at the moment for Fox. I assume it's gone down since Trump, but I'm
Yeah, but
assuming it's also
they're still
still
the highest rated
still the
cable
highest in
network.
the United States. So I wasn't shocked by any of that. I guess I was surprised that he, under oath admitted they knew it was a lie. And it's all about the principles of journalism. And I guess maybe therein lies the difference. At one point, you've got to declare yourself. You're either a journalist or you're not. And we all do have to follow some kind of code of ethics, or else it just becomes a circus. And that has been a dangerous circus in what's unfolded and perpetuating the lie in America. And this has all been a learning experience, I think, for everybody since 2016. And the world, it's not just an American situation, it is a world question now. And that makes it really important that we don't take our eye off the ball and see what are the consequences of this admittance on the stand that, yes, our on-air people, I'm not going to call them journalists, if they've been lying, openly, knowingly lying. That's not what journalism 101, let's face it. It's wrong. And I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. Do you have a clue of where it might go?
I don't, because I think a lot of Fox News viewers have been are convinced that this was the case, despite all evidence to the contrary, that the election was somehow stolen. And that's something that Donald Trump continues to say. And I think because it's not being covered where they're getting their news, I'm not sure it will have an impact on
The echo
their
chamber.
viewership.
Yeah, that's the dangerous element to all of it. You hear what you want to hear, selective hearing. And I don't know what the way around that is, except we are in a polarized world right now. It is probably been never this bad in history, the last 6 years, growing though. And I do, as I said, I feel there is going to be a correction, because it can't stand. This can't continue this way. Misinformation, which is the greatest threat to democracy. People just don't even realize what they're letting slip through their fingers. And I will again point to having just been in countries where it's just a word, free press and media freedom and democracy. These are just words, and we take it for granted, and that is very disheartening for me to see on a global scale. It really is. We don't know how lucky we have it.
Are Canadians as polarized as Americans?
I would say we're growing. We are very polarized in this country. The world is. It's the same in the UK. It's the same in France. There's probably not a Western country right now that is not as polarized. And I sadly will say the reason, the central theme of it is people coming on one side or the other of immigration. And that is the part that really personally hurts me, having covered so many of these conflicts around the world. And I'm going to speak specifically to what's happening in Afghanistan. And, you know, nobody wants to leave their culture, their language, their friends, their relatives willingly and go to a country where they don't know anything. It's because it's a life or death situation. And I think sadly that is one of the reasons that has generated this division in the world. What do we do with victims of conflict? I mean, certainly Afghanistan is, you know, I'm going to use the term gender apartheid. What's happening, that, you know, little girls can no longer go to school, and women who for 20 years have been going to university and working, and now they're hiding. The women I know personally are hiding in their basements. They're putting their kids, their little girls, through secret schools. This is not okay. This is not okay. And I don't know, I'm going on a bit of a tangent there, but it is something I think does not get enough coverage now. And I understand why. Being in the industry, we know we only have a capacity for so much conflict, and then people sort of turn away. But this is one I think we need to refocus on. I really do. And again, it does come down to the politics of crisis and how we weaponize it, sadly.
I agree. I mean, yes, I think modern politicians are more interested in using issues against each other than actually fixing anything.
And that's so sad, because that is such a position of privilege, really. You're an elected official. You're put in a position to work for the public. I don't know. I have trouble with a lot of these things, but like you, I mean, I also wasn't speaking out about things like that. Now I can speak freely about what I see specifically. As I said, I know there are issues with Indigenous women in this country and your country and immigrant women, but I really do think there's more we can do as a society.
Is it liberating? Is it liberating in some ways to be able to address some of these issues that you couldn't address when you were anchoring an evening newscast?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, there's things you didn't, you could say to your team around the pod, but you wouldn't say on air if you felt that any particular government wasn't doing enough, wasn't fulfilling an obligation that they'd made to whomever, domestically or internationally. And yeah, now I can. I mean, I'm not really that person, to be honest, politically, but I can now, and in an opportunity, if I'm asked, I don't have to shy away from it. And there's definitely liberty in that. It's about what we do with our voices that can help empower younger women, I think.
So what are you excited about? You're an optimist. You look at the future. What are you excited about, Lisa, as you look toward the next chapter in your life?
Hmm. Oh, I'm excited about so many things. You know, I will say I don't know what this chapter is going to look like. And part of it is it started certainly this past month, as I said, with Journalists for Human Rights, which is an organization I've worked with for a decade. And this was an opportunity to really dig in and do some storytelling where I never had that chance before, to just go somewhere for that amount of time. And that was great. And I want to do more of that. The coronation is something I'm going to be excited about.
Are you covering that?
I am, for the same network that I did the Queen's funeral.
That
And
network is
City TV, Rogers Network. And I feel that's going to be an interesting time. It's an interesting story. It's very rare that we see the pomp and ceremony. And also there's the little edge in there with whether will they or won't they, the Sussexes show up. Where's your money on that one?
I say he goes and she doesn't.
Because it's Archie's birthday?
No, well, who knows what excuse will publicly be given. I think that I think no one wants the drama, and I think Harry will be drama enough. But what do
Yeah.
I know? I don't know. What do you think of them, by the way?
Oh, I've interviewed him, and I really liked him. I still do. I've long thought, just leave him alone, leave the couple alone. What I thought about the book, I will be honest, I started the book, and then my 6-month-old Labrador Retriever got her mitts into it, and it is now
The dog ate your book?
literally, I am not kidding you. And
Come
I said,
on.
"Ooh, I guess Millie's not Team Harry." And I just haven't had a chance she ate the book. I came home, it was all over the floor, and there was no particular chapter she was most engaged in. It was an equal opportunity destruction of the book. So I have to get another copy of that. But I don't think he wants to upstage his father at the actual coronation. It's a complicated, now that they've lost Frogmore, that throws a bit of a challenge into it as well.
I think it's interesting that everyone feels like they have to pick a team, that nobody can say it is complicated. They have some legitimate grievances for sure. But there are also things on the other side that we don't necessarily know or understand, that, no one has witnessed the full breadth of their experiences or the experience of the other players in the saga. And yet we seem to have to pick sides. And sometimes we can just say, everyone has a story. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we have to hate anybody or side with anybody, but maybe just listen and learn. That's what I think. But I'm in the minority anyway. Well, listen, Lisa, thank you so much for spending all this time. It's been a real pleasure. I feel like we're old friends now, that we sat down over a long, potentially boozy lunch.
Yeah, we need that.
Yeah.
One of these days,
Yeah,
hopefully.
next time with cocktails. Anyway, good luck to you, and thanks again for coming on the podcast. I'm really grateful.
It was really great to talk to you, Katie, and I just so appreciate the opportunity to sort of share some of the things we've both experienced, and the passion I think we both share for the industry that we don't want to see destroyed.
It's a wonderful profession, and I think we both feel very fortunate to have had the careers we've
I
had. And
just,
hey, we're not dead yet.
well, exactly. Although